we titled this section financial operations optimization, but if we go to the next slide, we can go through and we can really talk about kind of I think it's a much bigger topic at this point, simply because there is just no financial operations optimization. It's really we're really looking at this as from the entire organization. And right now, most of the CFOs, I'm sure everybody on here has been through what we call a traditional ERP, or go through a implementation of a traditional platform. That would be your SAPs, your Oracles, your Infors, Dynamics, choose your flavor, a Navision, or whatever Microsoft has bought. And these vertical ERPs, they had a place and a purpose. They were really kind of breaking back in the day. When Philip was talking about his investments that he made, some of us remember those days. But they're huge. They're monolithic. They're basically a real jack of all trades system, but really a master of none. But they kind of checked all the boxes for the different functions that they needed to do for the organizations. But if you move forward in today's world, these platforms, they're monolithic. Then they're kind of, depending on where their focus is, they can be slow to react to different parts of your business. And really, if we look at how fast businesses change, there was already the digital influence of business before COVID. And we're all in the middle of what happened this year, how fast businesses had to change and adopt. And a lot of these platforms are all of them, they were still on their same release cycles, once a year, twice a year. And the changes to the business it was not there for them. It's then they also, again, they have to have all the features. They have to do all the check boxes, and that introduces a lot of complexity. When Oracle is going to compete against NetSuite and Dynamics, it's a lot of those RSPs are just check boxes, and it introduces complexity, and it's really hard to say, do those features actually matter? Firms have had to, as we've gone through, now that we're really driving measurements down to the customer level. How is your ERP and your infrastructure system really going down and driving those decisions down to your customer level? And it's really hard to draw those links. There's a lot of ways that companies have done it. They've done, implemented very expensive reporting systems on top of that, but it's been, pretty inefficient and pretty ineffective. And I think that there's a lot of companies right now that they're, that they're really looking at those investments and needing to draw those straight lines and having some problems getting there. The lack of it is also, from the traditional ERP systems, even though they're trying to, by tying the different components together, getting real-time insights has been tricky. It's rolled up monthly reporting, weekly reporting. That's kind of the worlds that they came from. But now business moves at real time or even advanced time. And, they need to be able to look ahead, and being able to tie in these type of metrics, real-time metrics, have been problematic. And, the part of that issue kind of ties into our last point on this slide, that ERPs are built on, that they came up from basically your basic accounting systems, tied in a little bit of the manufacturing specialties, a little bit of the operating specialties. And as we've moved into the digital world, the digital marketing world, everything web and mobile first, these systems have been very slow to react on those new realities as being the monoliths that they are. So, where do we go from here? So next slide. So really, if you start looking at what we're calling the digital operations optimization world, what we really need to start looking at as, systems that are built from the ground up to be, intelligent and extensible and, and adaptive. If you start looking at the where it should be. So I think COVID and where we are right now is really a great example of how systems really need to be able to almost turn on a dime, because when your business changes, you could be, really focused on growing a sales organization. Well, that sales organization is, your sales organization does its job and really starts expanding your production lines. So if your business, where you can be focused in your CRM side of the world, but if you aren't able to quickly scale your, your MMS, your warehouse management, your production pipeline systems, then it doesn't do any good, because you have a sales organization that's knocking it out of the park, but you can't get into and scale and be adapted towards the other things to allow, the success that scale, that the sales organization to be able to turn into real revenue. Scalable is also a fact. So scalable has been referred to, as when we start talking in the digital world, to go from 1 to 1 million transactions. Well, in the COVID world, that also means to be able to scale the systems down. You don't want to pay for any services that you're not using. A lot of the traditional ERP models are based on the number of users or transactions. And when you get into those contracts, once you get into a minimum with Oracle, getting out of that minimum is almost impossible. But that's kind of the old way of thinking, and being able to get into new models and new contracts and new systems where you can easily scale up and down is more critical now than ever. Accessibility is also, it's again, going to Philip's point. Some of us did start on the green screens, and you had a terminal that could sit on a desk, and that's where you had to go do the work on it. That's not today. It is, accessibility means that, especially CFOs, that if you aren't getting the data where you are on the devices that you have, and being able to get that data to every person, depending on where they are, that they can be actionable and accessible regardless of the situation, regardless of where they are. It just doesn't work in this day and age. Whether it's just forced by remote computing, getting your key people in front of the customers, in front of the problems wherever they are globally, is now more important than ever. We are going to be back in the office. We are going to be traveling again. We are going to be spreading out our organization. So having those systems accessible and not on terminals, and not just on a web browser that it has to be accessed in an office, those days are over. If your ERP systems or your core systems can't do that, they're not doing your business service. And then lastly, AI about 3 years ago was a myth. It was kind of a unicorn. There were some companies that were saying that they were doing it. And kind of, there was, even on that side of it, there was a lot of skepticism. That's not the case. Really, over the last couple of years, every business right now has an opportunity to use AI. The smallest business, $10 million, up to small, medium, and even the largest businesses really need to start baking in an AI strategy, because these technologies are really available up and down the stack. Even QuickBooks is, starting to use AI, and we've got some examples of that to be able to go through. So any business, even the little mom and pop coffee shops, can start using this. Next slide, please. So I really want to kind of give you, let's go ahead and start this kind of the nightmare scenario of when CFOs start talking to CIOs and they start getting engaged with technology. You start seeing, these are the TLAs, the 3-letter abbreviations that make a joke of the IT world. And they are, it gives IT, your CIOs, your CTOs, kind of a bad name, but they're incredibly important. So these are, when you start breaking it down, these are all the building blocks. These are the individual systems that run your organizations. They all have their own individual purpose. They all provide their own individual function. They all add to your business. They all drive revenue. They all drive productivity, and they all fit together in their own unique way. And so, up to a few years ago, that the CIOs and the CTOs used to, I think is a nice word, obfuscate to the rest of the business. Use these TLAs, be able to talk in these terms, and then everybody would kind of gloss over. And they kind of use this as a barrier to entry. But we have gone through and kind of approach this working, especially with non-technical people, in a little bit of a different way. And if we go to the next slide. So one of the things that we go through when we start working with the non-CI, your CEOs and your CFOs, we start talking about technology, not from vendors, not from the TLAs, from all of the different data points, but really where we want to start is really understanding where your value stream is either inefficient for some of your key business capabilities, or it can use improvement, or we can even go through, if we're in the right business, that we'll have some of these that are green. As CFOs, these should be familiar. This is your lingua franca, if you will. This is how you talk about your business. It is your major processes and then the business capabilities below each one of them. These are either working well for your businesses. These are areas of improvement. These are direct events or functions that lead to bottom line, that lead to productivity improvements. And when we start talking about these with your non-tech groups, what this does is we are having a much bigger conversation about your business improvements. And then, if you go through and you say, guys, I'm having some really issues with cash to order. This is not my cash to order on my bottom line is not where it needs to be in our organization. The next conversation is that we start looking and we start going back to those individual building blocks, if you will, and we say, we can go through and saying, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, can we take and implement one of these building blocks? Supply chain management system, part of a supply chain management system, a warehouse system, maybe part of the CRM, to improve these individual functions. The ERP system comes in, and when you do an ERP, they want to boil the ocean. They say, we're going to affect all of these directly. You give us a 7-8 figure budget, a 24, 36-month implementation period. All of these will be green. Yes, they would all be green, but your business and your customers and the world has advanced 36 months from when you originally did your RFP. So, there's a definite gap there. And our strategy is, let's go through and look at what is important on this list. What do you want to tackle? Where you have your deficiencies? Where are you really need to focus on your business today? Where you want to focus on your business tomorrow? And as we start implementing each one of these the individual building blocks, we come back. Did we meet your expectations? Are you seeing a result in the bottom line? Good. Now, where do you want to go and make your investment? And so we really look at doing this, being able to start with this value stream is we're doing technology improvements. We're looking at it more like surgery with a scalpel rather than the large monolithic ERP systems, which is surgery with a chainsaw. Next slide, please. So, we also want to talk about the impact of the cloud. So, this is kind of something that's been talked a lot about. For the CFO side of it, the biggest point that we want to make here is, it is the impact of the cloud from a CFO's perspective really comes down to a lot of things that your businesses, there are really only 3 businesses that really can achieve a significant business differentiator running hardware inside their organizations. And those 3 businesses are Microsoft, Google, and Amazon through their AWS cloud platforms. Those days of being able to optimize hardware, software, networks, BSP advantage is over. And really, you need to be focusing on, your entire organization needs to be focusing on applications. It needs to be focusing on data. Somebody that was running a server farm, or where you had a server farm, that person needs to be, that headcount, that resource really needs to be a business analyst driving revenue, driving productivity. And then the second side of it is, as we go through, your businesses are 7 by 24. Let's go back and start talking about, security. I hate following Nicole on any type of presentation, simply because I think that people start going, my only solution to keep my system safe is, big cheap tablets and number 2 pencils. But these cloud vendors, that Microsofts and those guys, that their their spend on R&D and security is in the billions. You can't do any better than those guys. And really, as you start moving those resources to the cloud, high availability, not having to run hot sites, not having to maintain colo facilities where you have to buy two of everything in order to have resiliency. Those days are over. So really, that's why we really like, being able to, where it's appropriate, being able to come in and not implement necessarily a full cloud solution, but really start working with organizations, hybrid solutions. Let's get things into the cloud, simply because, again, you're not managing hardware, which gives you absolutely no competitive advantage. Next slide. So this is actually funny. This is a pre-COVID slide that has been used a lot. Reasons for cloud adoption. The reason I just kind of wanted to point that out. This is how fast the world changes. Even before COVID, 47% of people said, reason to go to cloud is remote working. For a lot of organizations, it was March 15th. I'm sure that number jumped to 90%. So that was kind of the shutdown day in California. So that just shows you kind of COVID and the remote work and that kind of driving is just really a differentiator. But just to kind of show you how fast the world is really moving now. Next slide. So I want to kind of talk about how we look at these, going back to if we were trying to figure out a good way to overlay our rocket ship slide, showing all of the puzzle pieces interlocking together, how they kind of move in the areas of business that you have. So you have, your products, design, quality, safety, product information managers, and R&D. Those are all very different functions, and those are very different puzzle pieces, if you will, different systems that can fit together in a granular level. Some companies need all four of them. Very few do, that we come across. And so when we can go through and implement the right piece, and only the right piece, it makes, to address the products issue, that's a great way to be able to approach it. I really want to go through, we have products, finance, people, supply chain, customers. It's a standard thing. But really, on the HR side of it is where we're seeing a lot of these really kind of minuscule, really point solutions around dealing with HRIS issues. Where you'd have Workday that kind of is an all-in-one, very good tool. Love Workday. It is also incredibly expensive. But if you start looking at some of the other the point solutions, companies like 15Five is a great example that allows you to do, especially in a remote workforce environment where you don't have to make the solution, but you can set up 15Five, if you're not familiar with it, does a great job at going ahead and doing one-on-ones, allowing you to do remote one-on-ones, allowing you to measure and mentor users to do real 360 views of your workforce. And it is an isolated solution, and a lot of companies will use something like that to be able to go through and solve what is a very large organizational challenge, especially in remote workforce, without having to make the huge monolithic investment in a Workday or a large solution. In finance terms, if you start looking at the accounting side of it, I think that for those in Southern California, a great point solution when you start talking about getting into automation is look at the success of Blackline. Great solution that is going through and being able to do a lot of automation on systems. And the major vendors, if you start looking at your Oracles, your SAPs, they are just there's no way that they can catch up with the advantage because of what Blackline was focused on. So we've got a lot of solutions for that. So let's go through to the kind of the last slide, and we'll kind of wrap this up. So the benefits of a digital optimized operation is, so basically when you can go through and buy a point solution that does exactly what it needs to do, that is, it's cheaper to be able to put that in because you don't have to code the solution. We can configure it. We can turn it on. use it off the shelf. It's a lowers your cost of ownership. The second part of it is the being able to go through automation. I talked about Blackline. A lot of the point solutions, when they deal with very specific areas and they really kind of focus on one area of business that they want to improve, not only do they build a better solution that really kind of out of the box fits, they also are able to go through and automate, do a lot of automation. So you don't have to add a lot of resources in order to improve and make it work. There is a normalization process. So these vendors also had to go through and work around, being able to play in these spaces. So they created their own language that allows these building blocks to put together very easily and seamlessly. And again, it's also, microservices. I want to talk about, that you can go through and scale down and find solutions for very, very specific needs, again, without having to spend large amounts of money just to be able to get in and deal with individual problems that you have in your organization that lead back to that value, the value chain that we talked about. And lastly, everybody's building in AI. Again, I can't overstate that this is a real technology that we've seen work down to mom and pop companies. And you should be expecting whatever solutions you have to be able to take advantage.